you think I could like turn on the light while
did.
he's gone, and he's gonna forget that the light was on?
He's behind.
See what you made him do.
How's everybody's weekend?
Good.
Anyone see anything good in the movies or on Netflix or anything? I'm asking for recommendations. This isn't like. I really want to see the new Godzilla movie. It won an Oscar. You guys don't think that's weird? That a Godzilla movie won an Oscar? Why does that matter? Don't ask questions that make it less important.
Was it special effects?
Yeah, it was special effects. It was visual effects, but their budget was $80 million.
Million?
80 million. A Marvel movie, like the biggest Marvel movies, cost like 500 million. And they didn't win Oscars for special effects. I probably think they should, because some of those Marvel movies are pretty spectacular the way they look. Not so much as
The shows, the budget falls off so hard.
Yeah, you can tell. They fucked up when they started doing the shows. Like, I stopped watching the movies because it's like, oh, you have to watch that whole show first. I was like, nope, I don't. I just don't have to watch any of it now. I feel like a lot of people are like that. It was a phenomenon.
There's also a group of people that will watch all of it regardless of quality.
Yeah. I can't really judge them. I watch Law and Order, so. Like, when I watch it, I'm like, this is not a good show. Like, it's like so middle of the road. But you can like watch it without watching it, which is great. You can do like different things at the same time. Like read Plato. All right. So today, we're diving into book 2. Moving forward, and this is when things change. Before we get started, any thoughts, comments, concerns? No?
Oh, you have a question.
Yeah.
Why does the guy ramble for so many pages?
Who?
Glaucon's friend.
Adamantus?
Yeah, Adam.
That's his brother. What do you mean ramble?
Like literally, he's like, here, let me tell a story.
Well, this wasn't it's thoroughly representing the counter argument.
Yeah, I mean, he's actually giving a full argument, right? So, unlike what typically happens with a Socratic engagement, right, where you have Socrates asking all these questions, and then the person he's talking to just giving like short answers, right, and then he kind of grills them on what they say. Here, we have it's actually a really good question to ask, because you see a complete change in the dynamic between what's going on, right? So in the Republic, it's Socrates that's suggesting everything, right? So it's almost like Socrates being put in the hot seat. He comes up with these ideas as to how we're going to run the best possible city. And then Glaucon and Adamantus, who are both in real life Plato's brothers, are kind of grilling him on it and asking all of these questions and presenting, as Isaac said, presenting their counter arguments in full, right? So they're not trying to do, as I said last time, they're not engaging in heuristic behavior, right? They're not just trying to shoot him down. And if you see when you read it, they say it consistently. They're always like, look, I'm not saying that I believe this. I'm just saying we have to get the other side completely accounted for if we're actually going to decide whether or not this is the truth, right? We can't half-ass this. We can't just throw a weak argument out there, and if it works, it works. It doesn't. Like, if we're actually going to call ourselves philosophers, which is what we're doing here, right? So Socrates, Glaucon, Adamantus, they're trying to live a truly philosophical life. We owe it to ourselves to properly investigate these things and do so for the right reasons. And the way that you do that, as I say, another good way to come up with a paper topic, since we're talking about it, come up with a thesis that you agree with, right? You're like, okay, so, I don't know. I think that Thrasymachus let's say you said, I'm going to argue that Thrasymachus actually wins the argument in book 1. Let's say that's your thesis. And then you make your full argument as to why you think that's the case. Like, you actually believe this. The best kind of philosophical papers are the ones that do that, and then you come up with the best possible counter-argument that you can, and write it into your paper. So you say something like, once your thesis is done, you say, one might argue the following point, contesting my view. And then you give the best, most honest assessment of the argument that is designed to tear down your original argument. And then, at the end of that, you show why that argument, despite being a good one, falls short. And what happens a lot when you write papers that way, I'm going to be in grad school all the time, where I'd have my thesis that I would make my argument for, I was pretty convinced that I was right, and then I would make up my counter argument to show that it actually would withstand it, and then I'd go to write the sentence of, as you can see, this counter, and I'd go, shit. And so I convinced myself that my first thesis was wrong, so I had to rewrite the whole paper. I'm not saying you'd have to do that for you guys, you can just tell me. In grad school, if you turn in a paper like that, they're gonna kill you. Because they're like, it's obvious that this argument is not as good as you say it is. So it's worth it. But the point is, if you guys want to write your papers like that, come up with an argument against it, right? Just don't straw man it. Meaning, don't come up with like a bullshit argument and then say, see, it's ironclad. Like, challenge yourself. Try to come up with the other side. What do you guys, I'll just say it. There's a benefit in doing that, right? Understanding how someone would argue against your position. You're not only protecting yourself from future engagements with people who are not on your side, because again, the goal is to convince them that they're wrong, and there are some really incredibly smart people who believe some things. You're like, how do you believe that, right? So that's one thing that people do all the time. They assume people who hold views they don't care about or think are wrong, they see those people as idiots. A lot of them aren't. A lot of them are incredibly intelligent people. They just have really shitty beliefs, right? So if they have that level of intellect, then you can actually have an engagement with them. So A, you're protecting yourself against that. You're pushing further towards the truth. And B, you're actually properly investigating your own beliefs, which is the most important thing that you can do, right? This is the question Plato's been asking since the beginning. Like, how do you know that you know the things you know? How are you so sure that you're right? And the only way that you can be sure that you're right, is, well, you can't even get all the way to 100%, is to challenge your beliefs over and over and over again. So if you can't find any peers that are actually able to honestly engage in philosophical dialogue to get to the bottom of some kind of belief of yours, if you don't have a Socrates at your side, be your own Socrates. Right? Challenge yourself. Use the papers to do it. Or even if just, like your political beliefs are probably the most important and immediate, we get so swept up in the causes that we are fighting for that we forget to check whether or not we're still on the right side of it. Because every single person who fights in a political fight honestly believes that they're the right one and that you're the idiot. Recognize that, and then you can actually have an honest engagement with those people. So, that make sense? Okay. Good question, though. All right. Another big change in book 2, right? Because in book 1, as I said, book 1 is basically a self-contained Socratic dialogue. Socrates asks his questions, sets the stage for the question about justice. He engages with people as he normally does. Thrasymachus is a bit of a turn, right? But Thrasymachus is not an isolated incident in these middle or even early dialogues. There are some times in the dialogues where Socrates will engage with people who are actually a challenge, right? And they're typically famous sophists like Gorgias, Protagoras, etc. So they actually give him a challenge. But then after this, after book 1, now the tables are turned. Because the general theme is, look, Socrates, you seem to be arguing that justice is a good thing, right? But like, the first thing he says, as we're going to see, is like, well, what does that even mean? Right? Like, what is so good about justice? What's interesting here is that Glaucon calls Socrates out on obviously holding a belief. He doesn't explicitly say it. He doesn't say like, hey, Thrasymachus is right. You seem to have beliefs about things, and you're not explicitly saying them. He's like, so it seems like you're arguing that justice is good, and again, both of them, Adeimantus and Glaucon, are like, and I agree, but like, why? Because you could see how, Socrates, one could easily make the argument to the contrary, and they both do. They both give, I think, significantly better arguments than Thrasymachus does, as to why, because Thrasymachus is not saying that you should act unjustly. He doesn't explicitly say that. He just seems to be describing the circumstances. He's like, it just seems like unjust people benefit more than just people. I'm just describing circumstances. Glaucon and Adeimantus take that one step further, and they're like, seems like you should be unjust. Seems like if you're unjust, you end up with a better life, like almost always. And it's not even close. And further, I don't think that people actually think that justice is a good thing. Right? So when we dive into this, the first thing you know is they break goods, right, into three general categories. The first one are things that are good for their own sake, right? So we want those things because they're good and not for any other reason, right? So think of like aesthetic experiences of beauty, right? There are some philosophers that will argue that, like Kant, for instance, I don't know if anyone took 19th century, or philosophy of art, right? Anyone take philosophy of art? Yeah. So Kant's got some interesting views on it, and he basically thinks like through experiencing beauty in a pure form, it actually informs our moral dispositions, basically. But it's really abstract. So, but the point is there's still like benefits to it. Most people would argue like, you know, if I experience a sunset, I'm like, wow, it's like that was amazing. Why? Did it help you work more? No. Did you get a friend out of it? No. Does anyone think you're cooler because you saw a sunset? No. Yeah.
Actually, it does help with like your circadian rhythm, like falling asleep.
Seeing a sunset?
Seeing the sun go down helps.
Oh no, I meant like a particularly breathtaking one. Like you're like overtaken. You guys ever go to Tucson, Arizona?
Mm-mm.
Tucson, Arizona has the most drop-dead gorgeous sun. It actually didn't help me go to sleep because I would just stare at it. When I first started visiting Pam, that's where she lived when we first started dating. And I remember just being in the hotel, just staring at the sun sitting on the mountain, like the skies are like purple and red swirl. It's just, it looks like a painting every time. And I was like, how are you not enthralled by this? She's like, I see it every day. I was like, ugh. But then after like a month or two of it, I was like, it's the sunset, it's fine. She has the opposite reaction. She thinks everywhere else is, she knows now because she lives here. She's like, oh man, I'm missing out. So, but if you experience something that's super beautiful, so yeah, maybe there's circadian rhythms, but really the experience of the beauty of the sunset, right? Or like the Grand Canyon. You saw the Grand Canyon, like photographs, anyone ever been to the Grand Canyon? Okay. You will agree, photographs do not do it justice. Like, you think you know, and then you see it, you're like, whoa, this is insane. But there's no like benefit to that other than the experience itself, right? But then there are goods for their own sake, but also for their consequences. So like knowledge. Knowledge is good in its own sake, for its own sake, but it's also like really beneficial to like know things, right? Now that's a stance that you could take on knowledge. You know, it's like they're just saying it and not arguing it. Because someone could make the argument that knowledge is only beneficial because of the consequences, right? But they're just sort of assuming here, which is just an interesting thing, that knowledge is good in and of itself, which is a completely different thing than being good for something. But they're saying it's both. And then there are the types of goods that are only good because of their consequences, and quite often, doing the thing is not great. Kind of like, I don't know, going to the dentist, right? Does anyone here like going to the dentist? No masochists?
Free stuff.
Free stuff? Do they still give you lollipops?
No.
I used to get lizards.
Still pretty
Yeah, like
expensive.
floss.
What, floss?
It gets worse as you get older and you take less care.
Yeah.
It's not so much what you're getting as much as like the feeling of being important enough to be given things.
You're paying it.
The whole hotel giving you his candy.
Man, you could get stuff different ways. You don't have to go to the dentist. Like, how often do you go? If that was the only time I felt that kind of validation, everyone there would know me by like, hi, back for more floss.
It's like, you go on a different day from your birthday, and then
Get to
you're
watch
like
cool movies on
multiplying
the
it.
sky.
There you go. Good call. The dentist can buy a birthday. This sounds like a very sad life. I was thinking more like going to the dentist sucks because it hurts. It's not pleasant. They're rude around your mouth. Even if you take really good care of your teeth, it's not a pleasant experience. But you do it because the downside of having poor dental hygiene and health is remarkably shocking compared to like the role they play through your body. Like, you can have a tooth abscess, and if that happens and you don't get that surgically taken care of, and by the way, a student of mine said his tooth was hurting on Tuesday, and it didn't show up on Thursday, and then I had an email in my box when I got out of class. In 48 hours, his face, he had abscess, inflated to the point where it looked like someone took a water balloon under his, it was just enormous. And he almost died, because that is what tooth abscesses do to you, they kill you. Also, they've now discovered that a leading cause of dementia and Alzheimer's is poor gum health. Because if your gums recede, that opens up the possibility of bacteria getting into your gums, which then into your bloodstream, and then it causes all these problems that they know now. So the two leading causes now that they think, and again, they're still developing this stuff, is poor dental hygiene, and the big one is sleep. If you don't sleep 6 to 8 hours a night,
Oh.
you're
I
in
think
rough
it's like
shape.
I think it meant like too much sleep.
No, not enough.
Okay.
Too much sleep probably won't. I mean, make you lethargic and not as productive. Yeah. So, other things would be like working out. We come to like working out if we do it a lot, but like it's still an activity. It's hard, right? We have to like, and we're not working out to work out. Notice we're working out for the health benefits. Yeah.
Would you think like working out like for a career, would that, or like not working out, but working as a career, would that fall under like for benefits and for its own sake, or just for benefits?
Depends on the career.
Yeah. So, are you talking about working out specifically?
Working.
Like a job.
Working.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, you guys are both right. It completely depends on what the job is, right? So you remember in book 1, they were talking about some jobs have as their art something that, I didn't say this word, but the Greek translation, it'd be like noble, right? So kalon, and it would mean something like, like philosophy, obviously. But like medicine, any kind of, like politician, right, if done properly. But then other jobs like, nothing against trash collectors, but trash collector, right? It's kind of not the cleanest job, right? And there's no higher end to it. Yeah, you're contributing to society, and that's important, but there's nothing beyond the task itself. So working for a living it would be for its own benefits if it's that kind of job, but something like philosopher, getting paid is like an added bonus. Like, trust me, I did not become a philosophy professor for the money. It's not bad, but like, not a lawyer, right? So that's the idea. All right. So we're going to pick this up here. This is at 258b, right on the dot. He says, "Come then, and listen to me as well, and see whether you still have that problem. For I think that Thrasymachus gave up before he had to, charmed by you as if he were a snake. But I'm not yet satisfied." Look, again, this is Plato criticizing Socrates. And Socrates is so clever and so good at this that you run the risk of people disengaging before they should, right? Because like, this happens a lot, and I would encourage you to not do it, but I would do it all the time when I was an undergrad with my professors. I would have a question, and then they gave their answer, and I just go, okay, because like, they said something that sounded so smart and right that I didn't even think for a second that I would have anything to say in response to it, right? And so, and I still did, but I was like, it's just not gonna. So that kind of like disengagement can happen, especially with somebody like Socrates, because either A, the person he's talking to isn't as philosophically interested as he is in the topic, or they're not as smart, or B, Socrates is annoying, right? Like I would leave too. So you see Plato kind of taking that jab at him. "But I'm not yet satisfied by the argument on either side. I want to know what justice and injustice are and what power each itself has when it's by itself in the soul. I want to leave out of account their rewards and what comes from each of them. So, if you agree, I'll renew the argument of Thrasymachus. First, I'll state what kind of thing people consider justice to be and what its origins are. Second, I'll argue that all who practice it do so unwillingly as something necessary, not as something good. That's a big one. Third, I'll argue that they have good reason to act as they do, meaning unjustly. For the life of an unjust person, they say, is much better than that of a just one." So, what he's asking Socrates to do, and this kind of teases out the argument in the next couple passages, he's like, look, you're claiming that justice is a good in and of itself. So if you're going to actually hold that belief, you have to show me, Socrates, the tables are now turned, you have to show me what the value of justice is if we strip away all the benefits that are like external, the typical ones. Like, to put it in perspective, would you go to the dentist and get a cavity drilled if you didn't have a cavity?
No.
Is drilling into your teeth good in and of itself? No. Why would we drill into our teeth, which is actually a very unpleasant thing?
Because there's a problem.
Because there's a problem that requires fixing, and this is the solution of it, right? So I actually was at a dentist here. I forget the name of it, but she now left practice. I had a cavity on like one tooth, and then the one behind it, she goes, and when I fill it, there's not going to be quite a bit of space, so it might be tough to get floss. So we're going to drill that tooth too and fill that one for you. I was like, what? Do I have a cavity in that tooth? And she's like, no. I was like, yeah, we're not doing that. Because you know how much a cavity drilling costs? Do you guys pay for your own dental yet? It's like $800. And that's with insurance. Yeah, I know. It's horrifying. Dental work is insane. So, we have to decide, is justice actually good in itself? And Socrates is put on the spot to do that. Now, this next passage I'm going to read, it starts right above 359a. So I'm just going to read this long section, then we're going to talk about it. They say that to do injustice is naturally good. That's an interesting thing to say. And to suffer injustice, bad. But that the badness of suffering it so far exceeds the goodness of doing it, that those who have done and suffered injustice and tasted both, but who lack the power to do it and avoid suffering it, decide that it is profitable to come to an agreement with each other, neither to do injustice nor to suffer it. As a result, they begin to make laws and covenants, and what the law commands they call lawful and just. This, they say, is the origin and essence of justice. It is intermediate between the best and the worst. The best is to do injustice without paying the penalty. The worst is to suffer it without being able to take revenge. Justice is a mean between these two extremes. People value it not as a good, but because they are too weak to do injustice with impunity. Someone who has the power to do this, however, and is a true man, wouldn't make an agreement with anyone not to do injustice in order not to suffer it. For him, that would be madness. This is the nature of justice, according to the argument of Socrates, and these are its natural origins. What do we think of that? So what he's saying in a nutshell is, nobody actually thinks that justice is good. The only people that say that are the people who don't have enough power to commit injustices and get away with it. And so, and this is actually one of Nietzsche's big critiques, basically, right, of morality. He's like, yeah, the only reason that people claim that not cheating, not stealing, not lying, not cheating on your partner, not murdering people, they claim those things are just things and rightful actions because they don't have the power to do those things and get away with them for their own benefit. And other people do, which seems unfair. So instead of just acknowledging that I would do those things if I could, I tear everyone else down to my level. It's not that I think justice is good, it's that I'm the weak person who's going to be the one suffering injustice, and because I don't want to suffer injustice, because nobody would, we have to come to an agreement not to steal from each other, because I'm not able to. What do you think? The question is this. If you could get away with it, like, so let's say, we'll talk about the Ring of Gyges in a second. That's, well, we can just kind of really quickly go through that. So the myth of the Ring of Gyges that Glaucon uses as an example, it's this myth that has various tellings, but the way he goes through it is, this earthquake happens, and then the shepherd goes down there, finds like a treasure trove of stuff, and there's a ring in there that when he puts it on his finger, right, he turns invisible. And so since he's invisible, he can just get away with doing things, right? So like no one can catch him because while he's invisible, they don't know that it's him, right? And so what Glaucon is saying is if someone had that power, which is just a metaphor, of course, for the power to get away with things and not suffer consequences for it, everyone, he's saying, would do things that they don't do now. Because why wouldn't you?
Well, if you're the only one with the ring, won't they find out eventually?
If they find out, that means you told someone. And that means
Not whenever you're visible and they see like this weird ring on your finger.
that's still your fault for having a ring that's noticeable. You should hide it, put it on in secret, and then go do your stuff. Because if you haven't thought those things through, then you're gonna get caught, and that's not the person that Glaucon's talking about. Adamantus explicitly says later, like, I'm talking about the people who are like good at this shit. Right? Like, I'm not talking about like some idiot going and stealing a car in broad daylight and getting caught. That guy's a moron. I'm talking about people who like run drug cartels, right? Or like politicians, well, just politicians, right? Who are on the surface on the side of justice and the law, but in reality, they're just corrupt as you can possibly get, right? Because they have power. If rich people get caught doing shit, how often do they go to jail?
I don't know, Martha Stewart.
But why did Martha Stewart go to jail? She went to jail, but not for
Not
It was
real
insider trading.
insider trading. Yeah, that's a white collar crime. That's not. Yeah, the point is, if she went to jail, it's because she didn't have powerful enough friends.
She stole from richer people.
So exactly, she stole from richer people. So you have to make sure that you actually have the power and money, not to not get caught. He even says, but if you do get caught, you have enough power and influence to fix it. So, in the situation with the Ring of Gyges, like, obviously, you raise a good point. Once people, it doesn't matter if I turn invisible, if I'm the only guy that can turn invisible. Everyone's just gonna know it's me. So, if I tell people, I've obviously not thought it through. No one should ever know I have it. If no one knows I have it, then everyone would just assume I'm a regular, just guy like everyone else, all the while I'm stealing all their shit. Yeah,
I thought it was kind of funny that, like, I guess maybe they don't have a concept of consent, but just because he has the ring, he can have intercourse with whoever he wants. Like, he'll show up in the house, pop the ring off,
Bro, that must be
and the ladies
terrifying.
usually be like, okay.
It's like, wow! You can do magic! Yeah, so, where's that translation? Where's that line?
360, it's in 360B, right
Right.
before C.
360
360A, yeah. When he arrived there, he seduced the king's wife. So, seduced is a loose term. And I mean that like when you're translating these sorts of
Just
things.
like
Like if you read the secret history of the Mongols, which is like the book that they wrote to keep account of all their records and everything. Genghis Khan sure married a lot of people. That's how they recorded it. He married them. He did not. He raped more women than you could possibly imagine. That's horrifying.
I was just wondering if that's what that
Yeah, that's sort of, it's ambiguous enough, but typically what it means is had his way with her.
Okay.
Is probably the nicest way to say it. Because again, it's an ancient world. So the idea of consent and all that it's more, yes, it's not great. It's horrifying, but it'd be more like that. Like, he used the ring to do it. Right? And then she fell in love with him, which is the worst part of it. So, yeah, that's a good question. But what do you guys think about the ring thing, right? So, like, if you could get away with things, would you do it? No one would ever suspect you, ever. And if not, you have to say why. Because obviously you would gain from doing it.
I'm not really sure you can say that you gain from doing it.
Why not?
Well, so you're gonna steal a bunch of shit, right?
Yeah.
What are you gonna do with it?
Oh, I said no one will suspect it's you. They'll just assume.
Right,
Yeah.
right. So what are you gonna
Use
do?
it?
How?
What do you mean how?
Well, I would.
I gotta turn it on. I don't know, man.
Right. No, I just mean that you're gonna be getting a bunch of money.
Yeah.
You get very rich.
Yeah.
And then
Sounds
you
great.
have a bunch of money, so what, that's better than just having enough money to live. Now you have a whole excess of money.
Most people would argue that more money is better. Most people.
I guess,
Maybe not in this room.
Yeah, I guess.
And I think still most people in this room would say yes if they were being honest.
I know that, but you said to give a reason why.
Mm.
And I would say you can only sit in one chair. Yeah.
That's not true.
No, you.
I can sit in like a different chair every hour.
Okay, but you only need one chair.
Yeah, but I'm not talking about what I need. We only need water
That's what I'm
and
saying.
a berry plate.
You have no reason to use the ring because you don't need to.
Oh, well, I have a ton of reasons. Like
Because you want to, not because you.
benefits. No, okay, look. I'll go with your example. So if we only go on what we need, we don't need healthcare.
Right.
Many people got along without healthcare for a very long time, but they died a lot quicker but they don't need it, right? You know? So, there's
You
that
can
one.
argue that people who do have to pay for stuff do need healthcare.
Yeah, but like, I can get by on like a very ascetic lifestyle, but that doesn't mean that's the best way for me to do it. Plus, come on, man, you're not gonna have fun? Leisure, variety,
Okay.
etc. Right? So, if we're gonna poll the people about like whether or not they would rather live, a very meager, poor existence where they have to work 12 hours a day, just have enough food to eat, at a shitty job that they don't want to do because it's terrible, or they can commit a few crimes real quick, never get caught, and have a significantly stable, better life with luxury and such. No, you're right. Just say that like an excess of money is problematic because it can corrupt you. But that's sort of what Gaijis is saying here too, right? He's saying like, once you're given the power to do things without getting caught, you will very quickly do a whole lot of things that you never even thought you would ever do, because there's no consequences. Once you really truly imagine removing the consequences, the negative consequences, like you really imagine it, I'd be hard pressed to find anybody who's like, nope, I won't even take a nickel from a. Okay, I'll put it in perspective. I am quite sure that many of you hold very deep political beliefs about the people who are in charge of this country, whether via elected office or wealth. And it's because of those people, the people on this side of the fence would argue, that a lot of the problems in our society exist. The problem is, of course, they're untouchable. Unless I had the ring. Then I could do something that's technically illegal, technically considered unjust, and I wouldn't get caught, and I would help so many people. I mean, who really cares if those people die?
They do.
No, they'll be dead.
What about the family?
No, they can go
Also
too.
did.
Yeah, we can kill them too. Because the last thing we want is a vengeance plot. Just wipe out all of them. And that way no one will dare take their place. That's how the Irish won the revolution, by the way. They won the revolution because they were trying to fight actual battles. And they kept losing to the British because it was like Ireland, which was a third war country, essentially, third world country, fighting guerrilla war with like farmers. And the number one military force in the world at the time. And so finally Michael Collins shows up in like the early 20th century. And he's like, what we could do is, we're really organized and real secretive, because we have to be. So we'll just organize it so that we assassinate 7 or 8 of the highest ranking officials who are currently here in Ireland on the same night.
Here are your car keys. You should start your car right now.
Yeah, so they did. They killed 7 or 8 people. And then the British retaliated. This is a true story. The British retaliated by rolling a tank with a full automatic machine gun out into the middle of a soccer field during a soccer match when the stadium was packed and just opened fire into the crowd. That was Britain's response. Then they sent 8 more people to take their place, and they just killed those people too. And then eventually what happens? People were like, I don't want that job, man. And then they were able to come to the table. And so basically what I'm saying is like, Michael Collins organized it so that, yeah, we kill 16 people, we murder them, their families are now sad, and sure, I don't want that shit to happen to me, but look at all the good I did. It's for the greater good. My question is, why wouldn't you do that? I know I was being sarcastic, but like seriously, like if you see something as like horribly unjust, there's a wrong that you could right, but to do it, you have to do something that you recognize is not just, right? It's not like we're gonna say, murder is okay as long as you like really have a good reason for it. Right? If you murder someone, let's say someone's a corrupt CEO of a Fortune 500 company who has horrible labor practices that they're keeping under wraps. They're not even meeting standards by our country, which are probably a little low. They're just like ruthlessly mistreating their workers in a very illegal way. But they're so powerful, no one can do anything about it. Like, if you truly believe in that cause, and you knew that if that person was gone, things would change, why not kill them?
Well, what if you're wrong?
You're not. Just imagine. It's a thought experiment. Imagine you know. And you also know if that guy goes, everything gets back to normal.
Well, then you're God.
No, it's a thought experiment. You eliminate variables so you can actually get to the heart of the question, right? Because we can sit here all day, right, and say, well, then how would you know? Or then you'd be God. That is exactly the kind of, I'm not saying this criticize, I'm just pointing something out. That's exactly the kind of thing that Socrates doesn't want us to do, right? Not that they're not good questions, we're talking about practical application, but obviously we're talking about magic rings that turn you invisible. So we've sort of abandoned like reality a minute ago. The point is, if we allow those conditions to be set, we can actually examine what we would do instead of dodging the question, right? Yeah.
I was going to say that, like, that is how a lot of, like, decolonial movements work, which is not dissimilar to what, I mean, Ireland was a colony.
It sure was.
And so, like, that,
Until the 20th century.
it's usually, I'm trying to think, what the Black Panther said was, like, they wrote, I can't remember who it was in defense of self-defense. So, it was kind of in ethics, but it was more, like, grounded in a sort of, like, practical political reality that, like, this is sort of a, like, we're not engaging in these violent actions because we believe it's the right thing to do, as much as, like, this is the strategy that we have to take because of the circumstance we're in. And so, like, for me, when it comes to, like, killing, like, that one politician with the magic ring, there's nothing, like, for yourself, like, nothing worse will come out of it, but it might not even lead to anything better because you're dealing with, like, a system.
Right.
And it'll just replace the next person. But I don't really have an argument for why, like, this is making this circumstance worse in some way, even for yourself.
And you would gain too. So, like, you'd be helping your cause in some way. And when you say strategist, I want to be a little careful, because you are right that people will have justifications for why they do things, and it's amazing if you look into the reasons that people give for doing horrible things, how much they argue we're doing it because we're on the right side. Everybody says that. Now, that doesn't mean they actually are. But it's the point that Plato would say is, well, it sounds to me like you're saying this action is only good in this particular instance, right, because of the circumstances that I'm in, as opposed to if justice is justice and justice is actually something that's objectively true, we don't get to pick and choose. Like, if we decide, so Kant, for instance, is going to argue, if we decide that murder is wrong, there are no excuses. There's literally nothing you can say. No circumstance could ever arise that justifies murder because murder is wrong. So find another way, is what somebody like Plato will say. Is like, you can't justify that. Even if it brings about more good, you still did something ostensibly wrong in order to accomplish it. And it's not the whole two wrongs don't make a right thing. It's really like for you personally, right? If we're going to say, because if that's, the point I'm making is once you open that door, once you say, well, we can do it because reasons. Now everybody else is doing the same shit. And no one's going to go, all right, we're actually not on the right side of justice, but we have different reasons for doing these horrible things. Like, no one says that. Everyone thinks they're right. So it's a dangerous precedent to set when you're justifying actions that you otherwise wouldn't do, because you're allowing that to be a valid argument for other sides, which is pretty dangerous. This is one of Plato's biggest concerns, is moral relativity, right? So either A, prove beyond a shadow of a doubt that what you did was actually just and fits within the system of justice, or you can't use that as an excuse. Does that make sense? Yeah, I see your point, and I largely agree. But we're talking about Plato. Yeah.
Would Plato have disagreements with the death penalty, seeing that?
Yes.
Okay.
He allows it in very, very rare instances. So in Plato's laws, so Aristotle described Plato's laws as a boring list of laws. I found that out before I took a whole semester class on it. And boy, was he right. But I'm so glad I read it, because otherwise I wouldn't have, and if I wasn't forced to. But I chose to take the class, but you know what I mean. In it, there's this whole section where he like lists crimes, and then he lists what the punishments are. Did I tell you guys this already? No. All right. So if you murder someone on purpose, planned it, premeditated, what we would call it a first-degree murder, we don't put murder. This is the ancient world. The punishment is not death; it's rehab. Because obviously, if you've committed an action so heinous as murder, you can't really have known what you were doing, right? Because you think that you know, right? You're like, well, I need to kill this person for these reasons, but you are ignorant to the fact that the repercussions of these actions are not only detrimental to society, but also to yourself. Because when we engage in vicious actions for Plato, like we're actually corrupting our soul. Same thing with the ring. If you started with the ring and did what you would consider like fairly innocuous things that are technically illegal, like the one example I always give in my intro class is like you break into a professional basketball arena at night with a ring and you just kind of play on the court. Like that's technically breaking and entering, but who gets hurt? Like where's the victim, right? But once you do that, well, now you got away with that one, so what else can I do, right? So the power to not get caught actually corrupts you more. So if I kill somebody, that action is actually corrupting my soul, and I'm more likely to do things before. I have a buddy, this is the saddest version of what I'm going to tell you. He got divorced because he cheated on his wife a lot. And he told me, I didn't know until like it was out. Did it for years. And he said the weird thing was the first time I did it, I felt horrible. Like she didn't find out. He felt guilty, felt horrible for months. And then he said something I'll never forget. He said, and then after that, it just kind of got easier.
That's a great example, though.
It really gets to the point. Like, we don't get caught, so he never had to face any repercussions. So he's like, well, what else can I do? That happens a lot, right? When I was still smoking, no, I have this, but it's different. I'm telling myself that, but it's different, okay? It's healthy, it's not healthy. I had a kid actually say that. He's like, well, these are good for you. I was like, that's categorically false. It might not be as bad as cigarettes, but there's metal in this shit. I mean, come on. He's like, it's just water. I was like, no, it's not. It's not just water.
One of the Joel PowerPoints go up. Remember when the Joel company was going in high school? Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
He was their spokesperson.
I just lost. Oh, right, smoking. So, like, when I was still sneaking cigarettes, if Pam didn't say anything, I would sneak them more frequently because I got away with it. You know, something I want to do. And then she would call me on it, and then it'd be like, oh, fuck. And it wasn't just like I was stopping for her, but like her calling me out on it made me realize like this is literally harmful to me. Like doing this particular activity is hurting me. It's A, causing physical damage, but B, it's allowing me to slide deeper and deeper into problematic behavior. With no repercussions, there's nothing to stop that, and it's just kind of like a flood. Does that make sense? Yeah. But you go to rehab, and if you get out of rehab, real long story short, you kill someone again on purpose, you go to rehab again, because obviously we didn't educate you properly. If you do it a third time, so 2 stints of rehab, murder rehab, do it a third time, then we kill you, but not because of a punishment, because for Plato, punitive punishment, so like actually punishing people for their crimes doesn't help anything. It like makes them worse and harms society, and it creates fear. So he's all about like it'd be like going to school. The third time we kill you because you obviously are of such a disposition that you can't help yourself. And so we're killing you to help you. So you stop killing other people and hurting yourself as well. It's like a favor.
Ultimate sacrifice on your expense.
Yeah. But again, you got 2 whole rehab stints. On the flip side, despite this whole argument he gives about why we shouldn't have the death penalty, he saves the death penalty for one group of people, and those are atheists. And he doesn't even give an argument. No, he does, but it's kind of vague. But he said, the quote is, and as for atheists, we shall have them put to death not once, but many times. Don't even know what that means, but it's great. Also, if you rob a temple, death. Yeah, you murder someone in cold blood, rehab. You take a pot out of a temple, they kill you on the spot.
So is it divine energy for him? That's really like the,
No, I think for Plato it's more, I mean, because he does believe in gods, but for Plato it's more of the place of religion and the gods held such an important role for society that allowing that to crack, or allowing any issues to arise therefrom, the problems that would arise from that would be something that we just want to avoid at all costs. So basically, we use the death penalty in those instances because of the extreme problems, like societally. I murder one person unless I'm murdering like a king. Sucks for their family, but society just kind of keeps going, right? But if I cause sort of religious upheaval, I could just destroy a whole society. Yeah, that's what I would think. He doesn't, because if the gods had any like real interaction with the world, he wouldn't be concerned about it. He would just say like, well, they'll take care of it, right? So, an atheist, because they use, according to Plato, faulty arguments to justify justify their non-beliefs, basically. Yeah, it's pretty great. Okay. Anybody else? Like, would anyone want to give an argument as to why you wouldn't do it? Yeah. Ellen.
I was just gonna say quickly, like, for the thing about like atheists where you didn't really give a reason.
Yeah.
Could that be a jab at like what happened to Socrates?
Socrates wasn't an atheist, though.
But didn't they call him one?
Well, sort of. So he was accused of impiety, which means not honoring the city's gods, which he was 100% guilty of doing. But not because he didn't, I would argue, not everybody agrees with me. But he doesn't honor the city's gods not because he doesn't believe in them, because he says he believes in the gods constantly. He just thinks that the stories in the mythology are bullshit and nonsense. And the reasons he gives for that, which we're going to actually see here in this book, The Republic, is that they're actually gods. They should be better than us in every way possible. And yet, if we read those stories, like, they're worse than us. Like, the gods do horrible things for really dumb reasons. Like, they'll murder somebody out of spite, right? Help opposing sides to the Greeks in war because a different god who liked this particular army, like, didn't say hello the morning before or something like that, right? So he's like, these stories are ridiculous, don't believe them. And if the stories are ridiculous, then all the stuff about sacrificing just doesn't really apply either. Why would the gods need me to do anything? They're gods. So he just doesn't really do it. I mean, not always. He does sometimes. So knowing, I would argue, knowing that he's guilty of impiety, like dead to rights, he asks Meletus, hey, are you accusing me of impiety or are you accusing me of being an atheist? And atheism, obviously a worse crime in Plato's world. And so Meletus switches the accusation to atheism, but he didn't do it initially. In fact, the big thing that Meletus says in the Apology as an attack is like you're going around and preaching about all these false gods, claiming you have your own god that follows you around. And so, yeah, no one accuses Socrates of being an atheist except for that one moment. Socrates, like, baited him. So, does that make sense? Yeah. Any other thoughts? What would you guys do if you had the ring? Yeah.
So, like, what if I didn't want to do something illegal, but it's probably, like, not, like, unjust? Like, what if I want to, like, go around and follow one specific person and tap them on the shoulder?
So
they turned around, there was just no one there, and they thought they were going insane. Like,
you might end up leading to someone else getting murdered.
What if they turn around and swing?
Well, you might get hit.
But that would freak them out more.
no, he made a noise afterwards, like,
Actually, it would, though, because, like, even if I hit someone and it's like, they start talking, they're like, I'm invisible, don't hit me. That radically changes my worldview as the possibility of reality. So maybe you're doing them a favor. No, but see, even with that example, though, you can see Glaucon's point here. So you thought of something that you found, and I think it's hilarious, too. Just amusing, right? But he's going to say that you're going to cause that person a lot of distress, which you wouldn't have done otherwise. Which Glaucon's saying, exactly. There's a bunch of stuff that I would do or say to people all the time if there were no consequences to my actions. Like, you wouldn't? You ever been in a bar with someone who, like, says something and you're like, is it worth it? Right? Sometimes, yes. Sometimes it is worth saying something. Most of the time, Like, but if there was no repercussions, I could just say what I was going to say or do what I was going to do, and I didn't have to worry about them talking back to me or swinging back. Why wouldn't I do that? So he's saying, like, you start off by doing something that's sort of innocuous, right, and just amusing, but eventually, because you didn't get caught, you're like, oh, well, I could, because you'll get bored, right? And so then you'll have new activities to do, and then you'll just start really terrorizing people eventually. Like, people will think they have hauntings, and it's going to be, like, it would, and think about all the injustice of someone who's spending all this money on therapy, like, right, thinking they're going insane. Like, you have ruined this person's life because you want to have a quick chuckle once a day. That's a horrible thing. Like, actually, now I'm thinking about it, your innocuous example, as I called it, is not. It's actually really mean. And you'll destroy their life. And the thing about, like, that, if I said to somebody, like, you are going to do something to somebody that will send them into years of therapy, and they'll probably lose sleep and relationships and jobs over it because everyone's going to think they're crazy. And you're like, oh, I don't want to do that. That sounds terrible. That's a very unjust thing to do. Right? So even something like that, Plato, Glaucon saying, like, you know, and that's the issue. I like that example a lot, though. That's fun. So long and short of it is, what he's saying here is that people are not just willingly. Like, we are not engaging in just behavior because we think it's actually a good thing. We are engaging in just behavior because the alternative, which is everybody freely committing injustices all the time, sucks. Way worse than the benefit of acting unjustly on occasion. And so, to avoid suffering injustices, we all agree to give up freedom to do anything we want in exchange for protection. It's basically Hobbes' social contract, but here in Plato, right? You can see it like that's literally it. Although Hobbes doubles down and goes, no, exactly, that's literally what we do. So justice is not inherently valuable. It is only deemed valuable by us because we are scared of suffering injustices at the hands of those who are stronger than we are, richer than we are, more powerful than we are. And so we just go along with it. If I could get away with stuff, if I had all the power and money, Glaucon's like, why wouldn't you do it? Yeah.
So, like, what if we just did just things? Right, take it back to the invisible ring. For
Yeah.
example. Like, what if we just did just things for the sake of doing just things?
With the ring.
With the ring.
Yeah.
Because with the ring, you're invisible, so that would remove your face, image, nobody would have no idea you did the just thing, so then you would just be committing an action for the sake of committing a good, not committing an action with any sense of glory or honor or any perception of that, or any, like even receiving it.
Yeah, no, that's a great question.
That can corrupt you receiving glory and honor and too much of it for committing justice.
Right, so Plato is going to be wary of people who are seeking, and Adeimantus points this out later, right, where he's like, we're not talking enough about the fact that people don't actually praise justice, they praise the reputation that comes with it and all the benefits, right? So, but to go back to your first point, Plato would probably say something like, and this is straight out of Lord of the Rings, which I think is appropriate, considering the ring turns you invisible. Any Lord of the Rings fans here? Raise your hand if you've read or watched.
A long time ago.
I played the Lego movie.
Okay.
The Lego game.
You're qualified.
Okay, so for those that don't know, in the Lord of the Rings, there's a ring, it's called the Ring of Power, and it's very, very evil, and it corrupts anyone who holds it, especially the longer you have it in your possession, the more it corrupts you. And one of its little sort of tricks is that when you put it on, it turns you invisible, right? Which is obviously a metaphor for exactly this, right? So with power comes the ability to escape from consequences. So Tolkien is obviously drawing significantly out of Plato for this idea, and he would say, not Tolkien, Plato would say, even if we use the ring for good, which is a line straight out of Lord of the Rings, it would corrupt you eventually, right? You'll do things that you decide to be good, right? And let's say at the time, most people agree with you, right? Well, after doing that for a while, you might get to thinking, and you say to yourself, you know, I could get a whole lot more good stuff done if I didn't have to worry about these pesky laws, which are unjust. So I'll just break those. And then once you do that, Now you're one step further down the line. And then doing something a little crazy, like killing the guy, doesn't seem that crazy anymore because you have gotten used to it along the way. It's a slow build. But eventually, even if you start with literally, like actually noble intentions, once we act without consequence at all, we never have to reassess, right? We never have to reassess our actions, see if we're actually on the right side of things. Because no one ever calls us into question because we don't have to face it. It's amazing what you will get away with, like internally, if you don't have to look at yourself in the mirror, right? And so we then start justifying actions that 5 years when you found the ring you wouldn't have done because you're like, well, that's too far. But then it's not too far anymore. It's kind of like the way people look at distribution of taxes in this country. If you were to tell someone in 1942 that we would have universal health care paid for by taxpayers and everybody gets health care, or if you told them what Social Security is now, right? Because when they first started, it was very little. And now it's quite a bit. If you told someone in 41, like, what our government would be paying for, and it's not like it's the anti-communist thing, they'd be like, that is not the job of the government. Like, to get, like, and you go 50 years earlier, even more so. Like, when Teddy Roosevelt was president and he said, we need to go to the meatpacking industry and tell them to clean things because people are dying from eating their meat. There were people who were like, I want to eat clean meat, but the government's overstepping. You can't tell companies how to run their companies because that's not. So my point is, the things that we think, as things change and progress, we just get so used to it that the next thing doesn't seem that bad. So you all grew up in a time where the government had a lot of fingers and a lot of pies and put a lot of money into a lot of projects and programs. And so when universal health care comes up, it doesn't sound radical to you at all because it's just the next step. Versus someone in 1930, it'd be like a mountain. Does that make sense? You guys are like basically at the top in comparison already. You're like, well, it's not that far. And so that's kind of what would happen is you would start off doing good things, you bend a little bit, 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 and then you broke. And that's what would happen, he thinks, to literally everybody. You couldn't stop it.
Okay, what if you put on the ring with the intentions of committing injustice, but then that gets old for a while, so you start trying to learn how to commit justice?
What if like 3 ghosts come to you and they convince you that you should start paying your employees?
What?
Story about Christmas Carol.
Is this Christmas Carol?
Yes.
Okay.
Sorry.
Yeah, yeah, I mean, that could happen, I guess. But you can see how that could also go terribly wrong for that person. We're back to his example now. Like, if a ghost comes to me and tells me something I'm actually doing wrong, that's not what I'll be thinking about when it happens. But, again, all Glaucon is basically saying is, if we're actually honest with ourselves, we recognize that there are things that we would do that we might even think is wrong because we've been told they're wrong. But in reality, if I could get away with it, I would do it. Then even if you don't think that, even if you're like, well, I would use the ring for good, he's like, yeah, but you won't. He's just saying you won't. It'll corrupt you. Just like everything else, yeah.
I wonder if these 3 categories of good are things that are like sufficient, or if that's even like a good way to like split those things.
Okay.
So like, I guess for me, I'm just not going to be a tight argument. I'm going to start from an assumption that like all of the goods emerge from a kind of social condition. So that would mean that like, because that's the trouble I was having is that anytime you want to identify something good, you're always talking about some kind of consequence in relation to it.
Yep.
So like the idea of something being good in itself, I don't think exists. But also I don't think that there's such thing that's like, that's good for pure utility. So like those things like gymnastics and exercise are not simply good because of the literal utility that's giving you in a sort of like practical sense, but that there's also like a spiritual good to those things that integrates with them.
Yeah.
And that anything that only gives you a practical good, like a job that gives you money, isn't really kind of like a good, it's more of like fulfilling a necessity, so that it's like neither good nor bad, it's kind of ambivalent. So there is only the things that are good for both, or the things that are neutral.
So when you say something's a necessity, like getting enough money for food.
Yeah.
Right. But wouldn't that be good?
I think that's
To
just.
have food?
I think that's neutral. Because
I would wager that people who are hungry think it's good.
I think the way that I'm understanding this is that like, just because working that job gives you money to get food doesn't make that job a good thing.
Oh, yeah.
Oftentimes, it's sort of the architecture of the circumstance.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
That
Just-
turns
oh,
that
yeah.
activity into a necessity.
Right, so it, obviously details are gonna matter. But, you know, having money for food is good.
Yeah.
If you get it through, and then this is part of the argument for them too, they're like, and so what's the difference? Right, like I need to eat. And are we really gonna blame someone who's starving for stealing from a food cart?
Yes.
Really? You're like, you're a horrible person. You should have starved.
Well, I mean, you can go kind of long without eating.
But eventually,
At that point, okay, so at the point that you're literally about to die from starving.
you can't steal, is that what we're gonna say?
Yeah. You
But wouldn't it be good if they could?
I mean, they can't anymore.
Okay, so your argument then is that you want them to not steal unless they're at the point where they can't physically do it. Got it. No, but I mean, to your point on that one though, obviously we have to measure like whether or not the job, like if I'm performing a job that's actually like harming people, then we can say that the job itself is unjust. But to Glaucon's point, he's like, well, you know, why? It seems better to me to do that than literally not have a job and starve, right? So again, that's why Glaucon's in this position where he doesn't really believe this, but he's like, I'm trying to figure out like a way to argue it such that like, it seems like it's really hard to justify why you want to be just. Like you can have your reasons, but it seems like the unjust person always wins out. And this goes to the next thing to your point about, oh, by the way, Aristotle agrees with you. Aristotle's like, yeah, in Plato, it's goods in and of themselves are pure, and they're the best ones. Aristotle's like, that's not practical. For Aristotle, the best goods are the ones that are good in themselves and practical. He's like, why would both not be better? But we only got 50 minutes, so I gotta get through some stuff because I'm glad we're talking about this so much, but there's certain things. So Glaucon then doubles down on the argument. He goes, look, if you're gonna defend justice, so this is at 361 basically. He's like, if you're gonna defend justice in and of itself as a good, then you have to do so while removing all of the benefits that the just person gets, right? So he says, you have to imagine two individuals, right? Let's say there's two rings. They both turn invisible. One is given to a just person, one to an unjust person. So they just do what they want and they can do the just thing, like you said, right? So they're actually doing just things or whatever. But, to your point, we also have to remove, if justice is actually good in itself, then things like the reputation that you gain from doing just things, which is super beneficial, by the way. How do you choose the car mechanic you're going to go to? What is one of the factors a lot of people worry about when they're going to a car mechanic?
Proximity.
Customer reviews.
What?
Customer reviews.
Customer reviews that tell you about what? If they're going to cheat you. Car mechanics have a really bad reputation because they know that you have no idea what the fuck's going on, right? Like I had to happen to me one time. Some guy said that, that I didn't have a catalytic converter in my car and that's a problem and blah, blah, blah. And I was like, what are you talking, did it fall off? He goes, no, yeah, I guess so, man. I was like, and I looked on the car, I was like, it's right fucking there, man. And he goes, oh. And I was like, yeah, I'm gonna leave now and tell everybody I know. So they were just, because those things are expensive as shit. So he would have charged me for one, I would have paid for it, and it'd be in their shop, basically. So we go there because we think that they're trustworthy, right? So if you're a just person and everyone knows you as a just person, people are gonna trust you, and that makes it a hell of a lot easier not only to like gain relationships, but also within business, politics, people are gonna wanna work with you, right? They're gonna follow you. So not only do you get that, but you also get higher positions in society. I almost said, do we knowingly elect corrupt officials? No, can't say that anymore. But even the people that elect the corrupt officials, they don't think they're corrupt, right? So having a reputation of being just is good. Plus, we say like, oh, I can do all these things and get all these benefits. He's like, but what if you didn't have any of that external stuff, right? So if you're gonna say justice is good in itself, we can't consider any of those things. So you can imagine the unjust person, though, right? Not only are they lying, cheating, and stealing and gaining in that way, but the ones, as Glaucon describes it, Adamantus too, as they describe it, like the ones that are like truly good at being unjust are so good at it that no one ever thinks that it's them. Do you guys know who Ted Bundy is?
Yeah.
Everyone was shocked. Not just at the brutality of the crimes, but they're like, Ted Bundy? That guy that everyone loves and is like a super nice, charming guy who helps people all the time? Really? Like, people were in disbelief because he was so good at it. He was so good at lying that people didn't believe it. Like, there are some people I know where if they're like, you know, Jack killed people, and they're like, yeah, it makes sense. That checks out. Like, my first year college roommate, Steven, I was really nice to him on purpose because I was like, I'm hoping he remembers and doesn't kill me later. And this is the idea, right? If I am truly good at being unjust, I will have convinced everybody that I am just. And then to Adamantus's point, if I have the reputation of being a just person, I'm not actually just at all. I'm horribly corrupt. So I gain from all the injustice on the one side, but everyone also thinks I'm just. I also gain all the stuff that justice is supposed to give me. So what's the value of justice? Why would I be just? Like, if I'm just, I gain in this one way, fine, but I miss out on all this other stuff. But if I'm unjust and good at it, I gain both. So what's the upshot of being just? Yeah.
So when you're being like unjust and committing injustice, you're just experiencing life as a means to an end.
Yep.
It's just like from point A to point B.
Yep.
Like, just go back to Zeno a little bit.
Yep.
Zeno's paradox of motion, and then infinite regress within an interval. If life is an interval of time, point A to point B, and you're just living point A to point B and not truly experiencing, the benefits of life, you're missing out on the infinite amount of opportunities between point A and B to become a purpose greater than yourself and to give yourself a good outside of yourself.
Okay, let's see. Yeah, so I guess the unjust person would say, like, but I like all the things I'm doing. And, like, I am able to do everything I want to do. I'm free, right? I'm not beholden to anybody. I've accumulated enough power where no one can tell me what to do. I have enough money where I'm beyond secure. I can afford any luxury item that I want. I can go and travel wherever I want to travel. I can control industries. What do you mean, purpose greater than myself? Just like devil's advocate here is like, I move worlds, man, right? Like, I literally created out of nothing corporations that have changed the face of the planet. So, something that's pointed out here in Plato is, in these sections, I forget exactly where he says it, but and this is something Adamantus says, he's like, we glorify people. Oh, here it is, 364, if you're interested. He's like, we glorify people all the time that we know are not good people as far as justice is concerned. Like, we recognize, like, oh, that person is probably not the nicest person alive, but they've accomplished unbelievable amounts, like Steve Jobs, right? Apple, right? He revolutionized things multiple times in his life. From almost all accounts, he was a piece of shit of a person. Like, just a miserable husband, miserable father, completely absent, an absolute tyrant in the office. Like, the top engineers, his partner, Steve Wozniak, quit because he's like, I can't work with that guy. Like, his demands are insane. He screams at everybody. He stresses everybody out, makes my life miserable. And yet we're like, Steve Jobs, great guy. Not a good guy, maybe, but a great one. Changed the face of the world. And we all benefit from it. So obviously we don't value justice that much, because name me one person who is known because they were nice.
Mother Teresa.
No, she actually started a massive program to feed millions upon millions of people. That is why we know who Mother Teresa
It's
is.
like the nicest thing you could do then.
That's no.
But she had ability.
She had the ability to organize that.
Yeah.
Like, it's not because she was nice, it's because she did that we know her. If she didn't do that, we wouldn't know who she is. And she would still be the same nice person who follows all the rules.
Was she mean though?
What?
Was she mean?
I never met her.
I think
Probably.
she was like homophobic or something. I don't know.
Yeah, she probably was.
Suffering.
Also-
She didn't give people medicine.
Yeah, so there was a bunch of stuff. Gandhi slept with children. You know, there's innocent children. He would sleep naked in bed next to pubescent girls to see if he could resist the temptation.
He slipped up, apparently. In his own writing, he slipped up, right?
Yeah. So nobody's perfect. And yeah, good. Do you have one?
Well, can you do the same thing for anyone who's just known for being unjust?
Yeah, Jeffrey Dahmer.
Oh, good point.
Yeah.
Well, no, it's
He had
actually,
skills.
yeah, it's actually
Yeah, a very particular skill set. I mean, the injustice, it's not the fact that they're unjust that they're known, right? So what he's saying is that if we're going to say that justice, it's not the justice that we're praising. This is Adamantis' point about reputation. It's the reputation that people praise, because he even points out, like, and not only the ones that are just, like, people who are just get a good reputation, we praise them for all the stuff that you get from that. He's like, but we even praise people who are unjust. Like, we know it. We know they're not a good person, but that's not what we're praising. We're praising, like, their accomplishments. So it seems like within history, whether or not someone was just is almost always, like, not really the concern. Yeah, and then yeah.
I was just gonna say, like, to add to your point, something that Adamantis also says that they can kind of buy off the gods as
Yeah.
well. So it's not just in this world that they're set up, but in the afterlife as well.
Yeah, so that's, where is
I
that?
think it's 366A.
B, yeah, 366A and a B, that's right, it's right here. So if you have all the money and power and influence that you acquire from injustice, another benefit is that you can hide your viciousness more effectively, right? And then when you screw up, you can pay for things. An example I thought of, do you guys know who John Rockefeller is, or was? So he's like the oil guy, right? He had something at his height, like the modern day equivalent of like $480 billion of personal wealth, not corporation wealth. Like that's what he had. And he was ruthless in business. And I mean like just tearing down companies, destroying companies, jobs, whatever. He even, I think I mentioned this in class already here. At one point, to beat a competitor who owned a railroad that shipped his oil and wanted to raise the rates on his oil, because that guy had the only railroad from Pittsburgh to New York. Rockefeller had oil refineries in Pittsburgh. Rockefeller just shut the refineries down for like a year, losing millions and millions of millions of dollars in the process from personal wealth. But that guy, 75% of his freight was John Dock Road's oil, and Rockefeller knew that. It wasn't that Rockefeller needed the money. He's like, nobody holds sway over what I do or what I say. That guy thought he had the power. Turns out he didn't, because Rockefeller was willing to sacrifice, I mean, not only like the lives of his workers who didn't work for a year, but also his own personal wealth just to win. The point I'm making is Rockefeller was, by all measures, like a very, we wouldn't call him a person who was concerned with the well-being of his fellow man. And then he spent the rest of his life after, so he did all this, he was that rich by the time he was like 33, 34. He lived a very long time, and he basically donated all of that money, started charities, almost like he was trying to buy back all of his sins, right? I ask you a question, and I mean this seriously, this is what they're basically asking, is like, if he didn't have all that money, personally, where he could control it, and he decided, and some of these are like some of the best medical programs that you can find. He had an entire institution designed with a singular mission, which is to find cures for currently incurable diseases. He did that. He just did it because he could. Now I ask you, are we really going to say that we don't think those are good things that he did? Great things? Right? If we could commit injustices, which would then allow us to do things like that, why wouldn't we do it? Because he couldn't have done that if he didn't do what he did. But because he did those horrible things, quote unquote, he can help a ton of people. So if you want to help people, if you really want to help people, you got to get your hands dirty first.
Like Batman.
Like Batman.
Well, I got an answer.
Yeah, good.
So, if you do the injustice, it's fine, but since everyone else can't do it and things still work, you shouldn't do it.
What do you mean?
Like,
I think you're on something. I just want to clarify.
like it's not universalizable. Like,
Oh yeah, they're okay with
everybody
that.
can't steal.
Well, he says that explicitly.
Oh.
He's saying like, look, I'm saying if you could get away with it,
Yeah.
it's better. He has that qualifier in there. Now, hence the ring, right? The ring is a metaphor for a very rare type of individual who is able, through power, influence, etc., to get away with all these things, right? As there's they can even buy off the gods. They just make the sacrifices they need to make, and they're good. They're covered. They're square. If I had that kind of ability, why would I not act unjustly? His whole point is the only reason we have laws is because most people are too weak to be able to protect themselves from injustice of other people. So it's not like they're saying justice is good. They're just saying injustice is so bad that we shouldn't have anyone doing any of this stuff. And the only reason they're saying it is because they can't. And he even says, the person who could, like, if I had the ability, what he's saying is like, let's say I had unlimited money, unlimited power, I had all of it, I could do whatever I want. And you say, hey, listen, I don't think it's fair for, some of us to commit these injustices because it's just not right and people have value and we shouldn't do that to them. So I think we should give up that power we have to do whatever we want, for the greater good. Glaucon's like, anyone who has the power and money to get away with this stuff and says, you're right, we should do that, he's like, would be a clinically insane person. Why would I give that up? I can do whatever I want. And so the person who's already in that position, they're not going to agree. They might agree publicly. I mean, they will agree publicly, right? They're like, you're right, we should do this and help people. But in reality, they're not going to do anything because they don't have to, because they can get away with it. So you're right to say that like not everyone can do it. He's like, that's the point. Just like not everybody has an invisible ring. But the argument Socrates needs to make, and this is the important part, he's pushing Socrates into a corner. Because he's like, if you're going to say that justice is actually a good thing, then how is the just person living a better life than the unjust person? So for instance, he goes, the unjust person gets all these benefits. If you're going to say that justice is actually a good thing in itself, remove all the benefits. And some of those benefits are, to Ethan's point here, like just because you're doing just things, that's if you're able to do just things. Because if justice is actually the goal, that means that if I had a choice between being an absurdly unjust person that everyone thought was just, or a completely just person that everyone thought was corrupt, I would choose the latter. Because the just life is the good life, regardless of what anyone thinks, and this is Socrates' MO. So he's like, if everyone thinks you're corrupt, you're actually just, but everyone thinks you're corrupt, or a criminal, what's going to happen to you? You're going to go to jail, right? You might even be put to death. You will not have a good life. Society, because they literally think you're corrupt. They're wrong, but you will not live a pleasant life, and you won't even be able to do the things that you would be doing in the name of justice because you'd be locked up. Meanwhile, John D. Rockefeller did.
At least you're genuine.
I mean,
Right on.
sure, but that guy's still curing cancer.
Well, the guy that is curing cancer, that's not. He's trying to make up for injustice he's done. He's not genuinely.
Is he helping society?
He is, but he's not.
Would you want someone to cure cancer?
Yeah. But he's
Do you
not-
have the means?
No, but he's not experiencing it organically. He's not experiencing it. It's tainted. It's all.
Sure, but
Does he care?
yeah, but that's what I'm saying. That depends on your point of view, right? So he probably doesn't think that, and he's still accomplishing the thing that you would have done if you could, but you can't. And so what Glaucon says, like, see, even the things you would want to do that are good things, you can't do, but he can because of injustice. Last point, you can go. Sorry, I know we're late.
I'm trying to think how to say this, but like the part where he said, where like, why would someone willingly not use that power?
Right.
Like, so,
Well, they wouldn't abuse it, because abusing it for him would be like, you're going too far, you're screwing up, so they would just use it.
they wouldn't not give up that power.
Right, they wouldn't give it up.
But like, wouldn't you give it up in order to like not have the same thing you would have against? Like, back in the case where there were two things,
Right.
and there's the unjust and just person.
You guys can go if you need to go.
If the just person like knows how the ring works and sees all these things happen,
Yep.
I know I'm just working with a thought experiment, but like, if they steal the ring from the unjust person,
Yeah.
what does that person ever do now?
The unjust person?
How do they live?
The unjust person? So, Plato or Plato, right, would say the kind of person he's talking about is the kind of person who is in such a position that